The night was supposed to end with applause, not gunfire. 4 young people, gone before the last song finished. The killer, someone they knew. And the strangest part, the official reports didn't just fade away, they vanished. No one talks about this tragedy anymore. Not the locals, not the papers, not even the descendants of those who were there. Almost as if the town wanted the memory erased. But what if I told you this story is buried under a century of silence? And every piece of it, from the first smile on the dance floor to the last drop of blood, still exists if you know where to dig. In the next few minutes, you'll see faces you've never seen before, read words that were never supposed to be printed, and walk into a school hall that most people alive today will never know existed. And before you decide who pulled the trigger, you're going to start questioning everything you thought you knew about this town, this night, and the people who were there. Let's start where the night should have ended, the last waltz. Picture a polished wood floor glowing under gaslight, the smell of pressed linen and fresh bread drifting from the tables along the wall. The band plays, the dancers sway, and in the far corner, 2 young men exchange a glance that could shatter glass. You wouldn't notice them if you didn't know the history. But they notice each other. Every movement, every smile, every step toward the girl in the blue dress. A tea. And somewhere outside, a revolver is waiting in the dark. Now, we rewind. Plain Dealing, Louisiana, 1893. A town so small, you could hear the blacksmith from the schoolyard. So why was the school hall built strong enough to hold 200 people? And why did the town's most hot-headed young man insist on being there that night, even though his last visit ended in a fistfight? Every person in that hall had a reason to be there. And for some, a reason not to be. The farmer's daughter who broke a promise. The storekeeper's son who carried too much pride. The teacher who locked the ledger in his desk just before the music began. Why, you'll see. They were on opposite sides of the room. Joe Carver, a farmhand with calloused hands, and William Hargrove, the merchant's son. They didn't talk. They didn't need to. Everyone knew what was between them. A girl in a blue dress. And a promise one of them made that the other couldn't forget. In another life, maybe they would have fought in the street, then had a drink and forgotten it. But not tonight. Tonight, something else was in play. Something sharp, cold, and hidden. Plain Dealing was a small town, barely 300 people in 1893. So why build a school hall big enough for twice that number? Why line it with gas lamps when the rest of the town still used candles? Some say it was pride. Some say it was politics. And some claim it was because the town had once prepared for a night just like this, though no one could agree on what that meant. If you arrived in Plain Dealing back then, you'd think you'd stepped into a postcard. Shiny white church steeple. Horses tied neatly outside the general store. Children waving from porches, but behind the neat fences were grudges older than the school itself. Land disputes, accusations of theft, an unsolved disappearance from 5 years earlier. And, for at least one family, a debt paid not in money, but in blood. You'll hear that part soon. In the corner, the band tuned their instruments. A battered fiddle, a cornet, a pump organ hauled in from the church. Smell of oil from the lamps mixed with the sweetness of cornbread cooling on long tables. The first couples took the floor. Boots and polished shoes slid over the boards in time with the music. If you were in that room, you'd have thought nothing could go wrong. But in the back row, Joe Carver wasn't dancing. He was watching, counting steps, watching who she danced with and who she didn't. Upstairs, behind a locked door, was the principal's office. On the desk sat a ledger, the school's records, ordinary enough, except the last entry had been written only hours before the dance. In a hand that wasn't the principal's. What it said, and why it was written that night, would make sense only after the shooting, but by then, it was too late. Anna Mae Driscoll. 17. She'd spent the morning ironing that blue dress until it shone in the lamplight. That night, she danced with 3 different boys, and each of them would be questioned before the week was over. She would tell the sheriff she never saw who fired the first shot. That might have been true, or it might have been the last lie she ever told. When the shooting started, the band kept playing for 2 whole seconds, just long enough for the dancers to realize the music was the only thing holding back the panic. But we're not there yet. First, you need to know why Joe Carver brought a revolver to a school dance, and why William Hargrove had his own waiting outside, wrapped in cloth. 2 weeks earlier, the general store saw one of the loudest arguments in town history. Witnesses said it started over the price of nails. But everyone knew that was just the excuse. Joe accused William of cutting in where he wasn't welcome. William laughed. Joe swung. Crate of glass jars shattered between them. The sheriff broke it up. Neither man pressed charges. But Joe left with a split lip, and William left with something worse. A public insult he couldn't let stand. And then there was the stranger. No one knew his name. No one remembered seeing him before or after the dance. But more than one person swore they saw him leaning against the side of the schoolhouse that night, smoking a pipe and watching the door. The sheriff would later say he never existed. So why does he appear in 3 different eyewitness accounts? The band launched into a waltz. The floor turned in slow circles. In the corner, Anna Mae laughed at something William whispered. Across the room, Joe's jaw tightened. The teacher in charge of the hall looked over. She'd seen enough dances to know trouble when it brewed. She started to ward them, but she never made it. When the sheriff collected evidence after the shooting, he found 5 shells. There should have been 6. The missing one has never been found. And without it, no one can say for certain whether there were 2 shooters that night, or 3. Near the refreshments table sat a small brown envelope. No name, no return address. Just the words for the right hands in smudged ink. Most people didn't notice it, but one person did. She would slip it into her purse before the night was over. And 2 hours later, she would be running through the rain, clutching it like her life depended on it. Gaslight played tricks on the eyes. It made smiles look sharper, shadows look longer. You could be 10 feet away from someone and still not see the fear in their face, until it was too late. One eyewitness later swore they saw a shadow crouch near the back door, holding something metallic. In the sheriff's report, it never mentioned it. Sheriff Amos Leary had been uneasy all week. He told the principal to keep an eye on certain folks during the dance. He never said who. But in his private notes, found years later, there were 3 names. And only one of those people survived the night. Anna Mae left the dance floor to get some water. A witness claimed they saw her speaking with a tall man in a dark coat in the hallway. The man handed her something too small to see. She nodded, glanced toward Joe Carver, and walked back in as if nothing had happened. Was it a threat, a warning, or a deal she'd agreed to keep? The school board had assigned 2 chaperones that night. One was the principal's wife. The other, Mr. Ezra Cobb, a teacher known for never missing a dance. But halfway through the evening, Cobb stepped outside and vanished. No one saw him leave, no one saw him return, and his name never came up in court. Years later, a dusty pistol was found buried on his old property. By 9:30, Joe Carver had stopped pretending to enjoy himself. He paced along the wall, drink in hand, eyes locked on William. William didn't back down. In fact, he leaned into Anna Mae's ear and whispered something that made her laugh. That was the last time anyone saw Joe smile. In 1893, cigarettes were rare in plain dealing. Most folks chewed tobacco or smoked pipes. Yet, after the dance, the sheriff found a freshly crushed cigarette butt near the back entrance. The paper brand. From New Orleans, over 300 miles away. What visitor had been standing there? And why didn't anyone see him? The band leader noticed it first. Two men edging toward each other across the floor. He tried to keep the music light, hoping to dissolve the tension. But then Joe set down his glass. William stepped forward. And the room seemed to stop breathing. At the far end of the hall, the side door, usually propped open for air, had been bolted shut from the outside. No one noticed until it was too late. If the killer had planned to trap everyone inside, it worked. Outside, rain began to tap against the tin roof, growing louder by the second. It masked the shuffle of feet, the scrape of a chair, the subtle click of metal against metal. And then, just for an instant, the lamps flickered. William Hargrove wore a gold pocket watch, a gift from his father. After the shooting, it was gone. It wouldn't surface again until 1907, when it was found in the attic of a boarding house 2 towns over. Joe Carver stepped toward William. William's hand moved to his coat pocket. Anna Mae took a step back. The band played on, but the tempo faltered. Someone at the refreshments table whispered, "Here we go." The first shot tore through the music. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then came the second shot, and in the chaos that followed, no one noticed the third. The sheriff thought he had his man. Everyone else in town thought so too. But the facts wouldn't sit still. They kept shifting, like someone was moving the pieces when no one was looking. Scene prompt. Dark, rain-slick cobblestone street at night. Flickering gas lamp, shadowy silhouettes moving in the distance. Vo, intrigue hook. Briggs swore he fired at a stranger, a man who should not have been at the dance. But every witness swore they had never seen anyone new that night, unless they had, and didn't realize it. And then a name appeared, Mr. Gray. Briggs claimed Gray had been blackmailing Headmaster Wentworth for months, threatening to expose a scandal so deep the school would close its doors forever. A scandal so damaging it would make people leave the county in shame. But here's the problem. There were no letters, no telegrams, no proof Gray even existed. Until, they searched behind the stage curtain. This cigarette wasn't local. It was rare, imported, sold in only 3 shops north of New Orleans. One of them, in Boston. Boston was the last known location of Isaac Porter, a confidence man who faked his death in 1890. Porter's list of aliases was long, and one of them was Mr. Gray. If Porter was in that hall, this wasn't about jealousy. Someone came to collect on a debt or silence a threat. But Porter was a ghost, which brings us to the coal chute. Deputies found only one set of muddy prints leaving the building. Small, narrow steps, not heavy boots. Halfway to the stables, they stopped cold. The rain erased the rest. Edward Clark's revolver. Clark sold it to Briggs years ago, but Clark's initials were still scratched inside the grip. They found it in the hayloft, wrapped in Briggs's own scarf. Too perfect. Too neat. The kind of discovery that solves the case too easily. But the sheriff needed a name, and Briggs's was right there in ink. Briggs went to trial. The missing guestbook page stayed missing. No one searched for it again, till 1912. Inside the page, written in faded ink, were just 2 words, I, Porter, No one ever saw him again. Some swore he drowned in the Merrimack River that winter. Others claimed to see him in St. Louis running another scheme. In 1978, during renovations of a store built where the school once stood, workers found a revolver inside the wall, still loaded with wax-wrapped bullets. The dance ended. But some stories never leave the room.